Hey there everyone, Paler here, and welcome back. It's time for another Steam Roulette, and this time we're going to be taking a look at Chronicles of Riddick Assault on Dark Athena. Now I'm going to screw that name up when I say it a few times, because actually I don't know if this is all the Assault on Dark Athena versions, but at least the Steam version that I have actually comes with the original Escape from Booty Bay, plus then Assault on Dark Athena's sequel to it. So they're both within this game. And when I launched this up and saw that both of them were there, I was actually kind of excited. I haven't heard much about Dark Athena, but Escape from Booty Bay, I've heard a lot of very good things about it. Apparently it was an amazingly good single-player first-person shooter from the early to mid-2000s. So when I did see this, I was like, alright, we'll give this a try. So I did spend about a little over 4 hours between both games. I put about an hour and a half, maybe closer to an hour, in Escape from Booty Bay, and I put about two and a half hours into the Assault on Dark Athena. And, you know, it's interesting going back through and seeing a lot, because there's a lot of really good ideas here, and I know there's a but coming, and I'll explain all that later. There's a lot of really good ideas, and I can see why the game got a lot of praise for when it did. It just hasn't aged well. The big but here is, for both games that I played, the big turnoff was the controls just didn't feel precise. Both the movement, the WASD movement, plus the aiming had issues. The main WASD moving was kind of floating. You just didn't feel like you had very good, there were very substantial steps, right? So if you wanted to try to move over like 3 inches just to peer around a corner, it was very tough to do, because Riddick would take either one full step to the right and move you 18 inches, or you wouldn't move at all. So the controls just didn't feel to have that precision needed or expected of modern day shooters. Also, the aiming seemed to have both mouse acceleration and mouse smoothing. Combined with the fact that there was no real aim down sights, meant you were basically hip firing at 30 yard range pretty often. And the combination of the mouse smoothing and the mouse acceleration just made that hip fire very troublesome to do. It just wasn't an enjoyable experience, which is a real shame, because, like I said, you can really see that there was some real potential here, or a great game initially. Just our experiences have evolved, and what we expect of a first-person shooter has really moved beyond that. So what are the good things about this game? Well, first of all, it has some really top-notch voice acting. Rather than your traditional smaller voice actors, they actually, for the first one, for the Escape from Booty Bay, throughout both games, Vin Diesel voices Riddick completely through. Now, his voice acting isn't amazing, but that's more the Riddick character. If you've seen the movies, this Riddick is the exact same, kind of this cold, emotionless, anti-hero type character who's not really evil. He's just looking out for himself above all else, but he's not going to, forsake a child or something because of that. But that, you have Vin Diesel voice acting him, and it's perfectly solid voice acting. You do get quite a few lines from Riddick himself, and they're right in line with what you would expect if you've seen any of the movies. Then you have others like the actor, rapper, whoever you want to call him, Exhibit, voice acts one of the main characters in the first game. There's quite a few Hollywood names in this. Not Hollywood A-list actors, I wouldn't say, but B-list actors in this, and it does come through. They really took a big approach in setting up a story-driven narrative within a first-person shooter. Realistically, this game to me felt a lot like Half-Life 2. Now, it had some major differences from Half-Life 2, but it had that pacing that Half-Life 2 has, that Half-Life 2 nailed so well, of moving from shooting section into like a narrative section, into a puzzle section, back into a shooting section. But in Riddick, rather than there being a puzzle section, like a physics puzzle section, normally it's a stealth section that fits much more with the Riddick character. So, for example, in the first Booty Bay one, it opens up very early on. You're newly in this prison. Booty Bay is essentially a prison. In fact, from what I can tell, most of the first game is a lot like, I think it's the second Riddick movie. There's been 3 or 4 Riddick movies. One of them, he ends up in prison, and he's got to get out of it. And a lot of what I played of this is just like that movie. So he ends up in prison, and first he needs to find a way to get. He's looking to find a way to get out. In order to do this, he needs to curry favor. In order to curry favor, he has to kill off a certain gang leader who's being held up or propped up by one of the head guards, who's being voice acted by Exhibit. So you have to like find weapons. There's a big focus on melee combat, especially in the Dark Athena game. There's a huge amount of focus on melee combat in that one. But you start off and get like shanks and brass knuckles and stuff, and you fight your way through, and then eventually you work your way up to the guns, which was where the game really starts to fall apart with the controls. But in order to do this, like you walk around this prison yard and you meet all these different characters, and they're all voice acted and reasonably well. The face animations and everything are definitely showing their age. They're not very well done, but they all have like personalities and stuff that are impressive for the time frame, and they'll give you quests within the first person shooter. So you'll have like 2 or 3 quests. Like you'll need to get a shank. Well, in order to get a shank, you got to curry favor with this character. This character wants you to do something to this character, but in order to get access to that character, you need to curry favor with a different character, and you got to play it out through that. And you know, it's a very linear path, but it does give the deception of there being something grander going on. But like I said, I only got about an hour and a half into that first one, and then the controls are just so old, so antiquated. It's annoying. But you do have that, like I said, unlike Half-Life 2, where instead of puzzles platforming, you do play to the role of Riddick as a character. You spend a lot of time crouching in dark corners, ambushing people, and then the second game really takes over with some major melee weapons. I was over 2 hours into it before I got the first assault rifle. So the second game is actually a direct sequel and a continuation of the story. There's some leftover characters, and essentially, from what I can tell, since I didn't complete the first one, the whole beginning of it is you being picked up after escaping from Booty Bay in some type of like cryosleep. You're in some type of cryosleep, and you get picked up by a pirate, and then you're assaulting. Dark Athena is the name of the ship that you're assaulting on, and you get picked up in this ship, and then you break out, and you're trying to find a way off of this ship to continue to escape before the pirate captures you or kills you. And then within this, there's a lot more great voice acting. It does seem like they toned back on the Hollywood named actors and went just more with regular voice acting, but the voice acting's pretty good. There's a number of interesting characters you come across. There's also there's an interesting concept with this drone system. So this only appeared in the second game that I've seen, but essentially they're taking the pirates they're not pirates, they're more slavers. So they're picking up slaves or bounties, and if they find someone that is exceptionally unruly or not worth a whole bunch of money, they put in this concept in the game where they take the person and basically like implant cybernetics into their mind or whatever, and turn them into mindless AI controlled drones. And then a further take on this is an actual person through like a computer interface can tap into these drones and take control of them. So there's a lot of what would in normal games be like robotic guards patrolling around. They're now human converted drones patrolling around that if you get alerted, they can later be taken over by a direct person, in which case they become much more dangerous. And this is going to be what you fight for the first 2 hours of the game, maybe a little bit more. In order to have ranged weapons in the beginning of the game without actually them being readily available, what you can do as Riddick is you can kill one of these drones who have weapons attached to their arms, like they can't put the weapon down, and then you can grab a hold of the drone and kind of hold them as a meat shield and shoot the gun, but the gun has limited amount of ammo, so then you're very quickly back down to using weapons. So you get into this pattern of kill drone, pick drone up, shoot 2 more drones, throw drone down, move up to the next drone, pick that guy up, shoot, rinse and repeat. At least that's what I fell into because I wasn't very good with the stealth mechanics. And it was, it works well enough. There's also an interesting health system within the game. So rather than health packs or regenerating health, there's health stations spattered around. And it's the exact same for both games. On the health stations, they have like these icons, these 4 diamond icons is set up in a square standing on its point. And that's how many charges that the health station has. So each charge will refill one bubble of your health that you can go through and get. However, there will also be like recharge kits laying around the level you can find. So you can go ahead, you can use up the 4 charges on it, and then you might find a battery recharger that you can put back in to get more charges. But there's far more health stations than there are recharge kits, at least that I found. So you have to kind of weigh your risk and reward because you can't always backtrack to the exact same spot. So you might, be at the point where you're missing 1 bubble of health and the health station's empty. You can put the canister in, recharge that health, that 1 bubble of health. Then you have 3 left on that health station, but if you move on into the level, you might never be able to come back and use those 3 bubbles. So you've basically just wasted 3 bubbles of health. Or you run into a big fight and then you don't have the health because you didn't recharge. It creates an interesting mechanic that if the game wasn't so clunky would probably work better. Like I didn't feel like I was losing firefights because I was making bad decisions with my health. I felt like I was losing firefights just because the controls were fighting me. And that's a bad, it's not a bad design. It's just a poor implementation and poor modernization of it. I think that's what's going to be the overall theme of this. There's definitely for both games, there's some very interesting ideas and concepts that I can see were great at the time. They just haven't aged well. If you're looking for, if you like the Riddick movies, if you're looking for a decently well-designed, narrative-driven first-person shooter, these might be one of the better ones out there, but it's all going to be dependent on how much the gameplay actually bothers you. For me, well, if you've watched any of my videos, it bothers me a lot. If I'm losing because I feel like the mouse isn't doing what I want it to do, that's a big turnoff for me. I'll also say that they kind of, well, let me just show you this chunk of video.
What? Oh, you want some of this? Huh?
So that's right. That's from the second game. That's a prisoner on this ship that is masturbating to, well, you saw what it was. The game seems to be trying very hard to be edgy, to be grown up. And I like games that incorporate more grown-up themes. It's one of the big things I love about the Witcher series. But they incorporate it because it fits. In this, it doesn't seem to fit. There's a lot of vulgarity and just terrible themes. There's one guy that he's a murderer necrophiliac. He's just going off because he wants to murder this chick in this other cell and then rape her dead body. That's not interesting or grown up. I mean, I guess it does show that he's a psychopath, but it just feels out of place because it's not a theme that they ever address. It's just that's what this guy is, and there's no setup or reward. It's just a look how edgy we are type moment. And I'm not a big fan of being edgy for the sake of being edgy. Do it because it fits in, but I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much out of it, but I guess the point of this is do be warned. This game is definitely not for kids. It's I wouldn't go NC-17, but 15 plus probably for some of these themes, as it's a little turn-offish even for me, and I think that about covers it. That is Chronicles of Riddick, Chronicles of Riddick, Assault on Dark Athena, plus the Escape from Butcher Bay prequel to it, or first game, sequel, whatever you want to do that. I can see why people loved these games some 10 years ago, but by today's standards, their controls are too bad for me to enjoy them too much. Alright, if you've played them, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Until next time, this has been Paler. Thanks for watching.